Carlton-Bailly, and I love to sew curves. Today I'm going to walk you through some tips and tricks on how you can have the perfect curved quilt. Over here you see I created this super fun ombre cloud quilt. Not only does it incorporate curves, but it also incorporates squares, so it's a great quilt for beginners. All right, let's get started. The first thing that you need when you're sewing curves is a plastic template. I have one here. This is a 6.5 inch curve. And what we're gonna do is I have a 6.5 inch block cut. I actually have 4 cut. This is a great shortcut tip. If you have a 28 millimeter rotary cutter with a fresh blade in it, you can cut through 4 layers of fabric. It's super simple. The 28 millimeter rotary cutter really helps when you're going around a curve because you don't have that big blade in the way. So look at that. We just made our first curve. So that's the convex. Let's go over to the concave. Again, here's your second piece. And we're going to take layered fabric again because we have a fresh blade in our rotary cutter. We're gonna line it up here. When you're doing the concave part, you know it's concave because you crawl into a cave. That's a good way to remember it. I like to cut my edges first. And with this great spinning mat, I get to spin it around so I'm not moving my fabric. I cut again on the edge. I cut again here. And then lastly, I cut the curved part. When I'm cutting my curved part, I like to put my finger here to hold it. And that way I know that my fabric doesn't shift. And sometimes you get a little stuck. All right, so we have our concave piece and our convex piece. Now we're gonna put them together. The first thing that we're going to do is mark our centers. The way that I like to do it is just a quick press on my iron. Fold it in half and press the center just like that. You can do it any way you want. Some people will mark it, some people will cut it. I prefer to press. Now, once you get them pressed, we're going to base them together. Now there's a lot of controversy over how to base curves. I have found what works for me, and that is a glue stick. You can use any kind of glue you want, just find what works. So I'm going to put a little dab in the center here, and then I'm going to put a little dab on the edge. And then with short strokes, so I'm not pulling the fabric, I'll add my glue, just like that. Then we take our concave piece, we stick it in the middle, and we take the finger and just slowly push it down. This dries really quick. I can go sew this right now with no problem. All right, let's do the other side. So glue on the edge, short strokes, there we go. Place this there, and look how easy this comes together. It just lays so nice. Now I do the concave part on top of the convex part because all this extra fabric, I get to see it when it sews, so I know if it's going to wrinkle. Let's go over to the sewing machine and sew this together. So first we'll backstitch, and then we go forward. Just stitch around. Take your time when you're first starting. This isn't a race. Do a nice slow stitch and backstitch at the end. Cut your seam, and you just sewed your first curve. Okay, so let's go to the iron and press. Now, a long time ago, a friend of mine told me that if you were using 2 hands to press your block, you were stretching your fabric. Well, in this case, I like to just gently hold from the back side and get that seam as far down as I can. And then I flip it over like this and use the edge of your iron to gently press the seams in. You don't want to do it too hard here. You just want to get it in. Give it a little steam if you need to. Don't be afraid of the steam. All right, so now we have a nice flat block. It's time to square it up. Now, listen, I know squaring up blocks is so time consuming, but in the end, it's really gonna make a difference. Now, if you look at my ruler here, you see that I have some washi tape on there. And that's a visual clue for me, so I know where to line up my block. You'll also see that I have a little sticker here that indicates which way I should put my block. So I'm going to line up the edge of my curve with that washi tape, which is 1/4 inch. When you're doing any kind of block, curve included, I highly suggest that you batch your tasks. It's a term that I used in my old job. You do everything at once. So you would cut all your curves, baste all your curves, sew all your curves, and then cut all of your curves. And it really saves time. So turning our spinning mat around, we're just gonna get a few little edges here. And there we go. We have a beautiful 1/4 inch mark here and here on our curve. Now, let's go ahead and sew our curves together. And when you are matching up your curves, I have a really good tip for you. So here you see we've got our curves together, and we want to match those points. Now, you can either glue baste or pin at this point. I prefer to pin. And what I do is I come in at a diagonal here, and then I pick up that seam. And then I check. I'm like, oh, okay, does that look lined up? And it does. So now I'll pin my other side. And we'll go to the machine and stitch. One thing that I like to do when I'm sewing is I'll start 1/4 inch in, and that way the machine doesn't suck my fabric in. So I'll start and backstitch, and then sew through. We get to the very end and backstitch, cut our thread, take out our pins, and let's see how well we did. All right, so here our curves are matching up really nicely. Now let's take a second and let's make a circle and put these two together. So when you're doing that, you want to start in the middle, pin. So let's double check and make sure they look good. They look pretty good. Put our fabric in 1/4 inch and let's stitch on down. Now, this seam guide here is really helpful not only for sewing curves, but for also doing your straight stitching. It really will improve your piecing. I'll have information on where to get one if it didn't come with your machine in my notes. Okay, good. All right, let's put our pins in and let's see how we did. So here we have a great curved circle with matching seams. So now that you know how to sew a curve, let's go to the finished quilt and look at all the ways that you can use your curves. Here you'll see a similar circle like we just made. You've got a half moon, you've got a 1/4 circle, and in it there's also squares. Don't be afraid to mix it up. And that's how easy it is to sew curves.